This is NHTV2, North Haven Government Television, a service of North Haven Community Television. The following program is brought to you through the support of the Town of North Haven.
Good evening. My name is Stacy Yarborough, and I'm the North Haven Town Clerk, and I welcome you to our annual town meeting. I will have the meeting now come to order. Thank you for joining us on this very rainy, kind of scary night. Before we move forward with the opening of our annual town meeting, we do have to elect a moderator. The moderator is nominated and elected by the members of the meeting. It is the moderator's function to bring before the meeting all items of the warning and to assist in obtaining the objective of the meeting while ensuring the rights of individual voters who wish to be heard. The moderator's duties also include helping any member of the meeting who seeks clarification or to advise them with regard to parliamentary procedure. Further, when it's time to vote on any issue tonight, including the moderator, please be advised to vote, one must be an elector. To be an elector of the town meeting, one must have been a registered voter in the town at the time of the most recent election, or one who pays taxes to the town on the assessment of property of not less than $1,000 on the most recent grand list assessment date, as well as being a citizen of the United States and 18 years of age or older. If you're unsure of your voting eligibility, please check with me at any time tonight, as I do have the list of the registry list for the town. At this time, the floor is open for nominations for meeting moderator. Are there any nominations? Is there a second? Any other nominations for tonight's meeting moderator? Hearing none, I'll put it to a vote. All in favor of Teresa Ranciato-Vili as the annual town meeting moderator, please signify by saying aye. All opposed by saying nay. I now declare Teresa Ranciato-Vili as the annual town meeting moderator. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Teresa Ranciato-Vili. Thank you for the nomination. And the town clerk will now read the warning and call of tonight's annual town meeting.
Thank you. Notice is hereby given to the electors and citizens qualified to vote in town meetings of the town of North Haven, Connecticut, that the annual town meeting will be held Monday, September 19, 2022 at 7 p.m. in the auditorium of the North Haven High School, 221 Elm Street, North Haven, Connecticut, for the following purposes. A, to consider and act upon a resolution in accordance with the recommendations of the Board of Finance to adjust appropriations of certain line items among the various departments in the fiscal year 2021-2022 budget, transferring amounts of over $20,000 and the sum of $952,598. B, to consider and act upon town acceptance of the following road, Sundown Place. C, to consider and act upon the recommendation of the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen, A, to appropriate $2,600,000 for the milling and paving of town roadways. The project shall consist of milling and removal of waste materials, paving and materials, installation of manholes and drainage risers, traffic protection, including signage and police and flag personnel. The appropriation may be spent for design, demolition, and construction costs, equipment, furnishings, materials, site improvements, survey costs, architect's fees, engineering fees, other consultants' fees, legal fees, net temporary interest, and other financing costs, and other expenses related to the project. B, to issue bonds or notes of the town in the amount not to exceed $2,600,000. To provide that amount of bonds or notes authorized to be issued shall be reduced by any grants received for the project. C, to issue temporary notes of the town in an amount not to exceed $2,600,000 in anticipation of such bonds or notes. D, to determine or authorize the first selectman and the treasurer of the town to determine the amounts, dates, interest rates, maturities, redemption provisions, form, and other details of the bonds or notes, and to perform all other acts which are necessary or appropriate to issue the bonds or notes. And E, to take such action to allow temporary advances of available funds which the town reasonably expects will be reimbursed from the proceeds of borrowings, and to authorize the first selectman and the treasurer to bind the town pursuant to such representations and covenants as they deem necessary or advisable, in order to maintain the continued exemption from federal income taxation of interest on the bonds or notes authorized by the resolution, if issued on a tax-exempt basis, including covenants to pay rebates of investment earnings to the United States in future years. F, to authorize the first selectman and the treasurer to make representations and enter into written agreements for the benefit of holders of the bonds or notes, to provide secondary market disclosure information, which agreements may include such terms as they deem advisable or appropriate, in order to comply with applicable laws or rules pertaining to the sale or purchase of such bonds or notes. And G, to authorize the first selectman, the treasurer, and other proper officers of the town to take all other action which is necessary or desirable to complete the project and to issue bonds or notes to finance the aforesaid appropriation. This notice was dated at North Haven, Connecticut on the first day of September 2022.
Town clerk will now read our first item of the night, agenda item A.
Agenda item A, to consider and act upon a resolution in accordance with the recommendation of the Board of Finance to adjust appropriations of certain line items among the various departments in the fiscal year 2021-22 budget, transferring amounts of over $20,000 in total sum of $952,598.
Resolved that in accordance with the recommendation of the Board of Finance, adjust appropriations of certain line items among the various departments in the fiscal year 2021-22 budget, transferring amounts over $20,000 in the total sum of $952,598. Is there a second? Now we come to the point of the meeting when we open the floor for discussion on this agenda item. There are rules for any discussion. Anyone who wishes to speak will get a chance to comment before you'll be called a second time. You must come forward to the microphone, state your name and address before you begin. We are limiting discussion to this item only. Please limit your discussion and questions to no longer than 5 to 10 minutes, and you can have another turn after your first one. Is there any discussion? First Selectman Frida.
Thank you very much, Teresa, and welcome for those who are here this evening. So I wanted to share 4 slides tonight for those watching on Facebook and North Haven TV to give some perspective as to what this resolution or this issue is all about. When we look at the total fiscal year budget ending 2022, there were approximately 469 line items in that budget that ended this past June. Out of those items, there were 318 items that either came in under budget or right on budget. There were 10 items, and that's the purpose of tonight's meeting. By town charter, it's this September meeting that has to authorize these transfers. The total of 10 items among various departments of over $20,000. And you see the 10 items here. Varying degrees of over what those line item budgets were. As was just read, $952,598. Now that should not suggest or indicate that the town overspent its budget. Within the 463 lines, as I just illustrated earlier, many came in under. Many came in right on target. When we look at the overall budget, we balanced this year's budget, and we're projecting, the books have not closed yet, but we will deliver a small surplus this year of $96,680. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion to this item? Any other discussion? Okay. Seeing no hands, we will vote on the resolution. All in favor of agenda item A, please signify by saying aye. All opposed signify by saying nay. Motion passes. The town clerk will now read our next item of the night, agenda item B.
Thank you. Agenda item B, to consider and act upon town acceptance of the following road, Sundown Place.
Resolved that in accordance with the recommendation of the town engineer, the following road is deemed accepted as a road of the town of North Haven, Sundown Place. Is there a second? Thank you. Is there any discussion to this item? For Selectman Frida.
Thank you. Sundown Place is a new road that's off of Cottontail in the Grove section. So about 3 to 4 years ago, the people who owned the property wanted to sell it and subdevelop it. As was just read, our town engineer, Andy Bevilacqua, deems the road worthy of us accepting it. And the road acceptance in our form of government has to be authorized by the town meeting. It meets all of the standards as to what our town engineer thinks it should, and we recommend that it be accepted. Thank you.
All in favor of agenda item B, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed signify by saying nay. Motion passes. The town clerk will now read our final agenda item of the night, agenda item C.
Thank you. Agenda item C, to consider and act upon the recommendation of the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen. A, to appropriate $2,600,000 for the milling and paving of town roadways. The project shall consist of milling and removal of waste materials, paving and materials, installation of manholes and drainage risers, traffic protection, including signage and police and flag personnel. The appropriation may be spent for design, demolition, and construction costs, equipment, furnishings, materials, site improvements, survey costs, architect fees, engineering fees, other consultants' fees, legal fees, net temporary interest, and other financing costs and other expenses relating to the project. B, to issue bonds or notes of the town in an amount not to exceed $2,600,000, to provide that the amount of bonds or notes authorized to be issued shall be reduced by any grants received for the project. C, to issue temporary notes of the town in an amount not to exceed $2,600,000 in anticipation of such bonds or notes. D, to determine or authorize the first selectman and the treasurer of the town to determine the amounts, dates, interest rates, maturities, redemptions, provisions, forms, and other details of the bonds or notes, and to perform all other acts which are necessary or appropriate to issue the bonds or notes. E, to take such action to allow temporary advances of available funds which the town reasonably expects will be reimbursed from the proceeds of borrowings, and to authorize the first selectman and the treasurer to bind the town pursuant to such representations and covenants as they deem necessary or advisable in order to maintain the continued exemption from federal income taxation of interest on the bonds or notes authorized by the resolution if issued on a tax-exempt basis, including covenants to pay rebates of investment earnings to the United States in future years. F, to authorize the first selectman and the treasurer to make representations and enter into written agreements for the benefit of holders of the bonds or notes, to provide secondary market disclosure information, which agreements may include such terms as they deem advisable or appropriate in order to comply with the applicable laws or rules pertaining to the sale or purchase of such bonds or notes. And G, to authorize the first selectman, the treasurer, and other proper officers of the town to take all other action which is necessary or desirable to complete the project and to issue bonds or notes to finance the aforesaid appropriation.
Is there a second? Thank you. Is there any discussion for agenda item C? For Selectman Frida.
Thank you. This is more of a public service announcement with a little bit of information. So every year, with the exception of one over the past 13 years, we have tried to improve our roadways by bonding for 10 miles worth of roads. This year, it's a little bit over 11 miles. We missed one year, a couple of years ago, when we had a tornado and many of the streets and roads had wires and debris, so we could not pave roads that year. But consider this, ladies and gentlemen, with approximately 194 miles worth of roadways, if you look at 13 years and say that we've averaged 10 miles a year, when we even subtracting the year we didn't do it, we still have not been able to pave all the roads here. It's a very expensive proposition. If we were to have paved all the roads 13 years ago, that would have roughly been a $40 million package, and that's almost impossible. So every year, we try to pave roads. And what we do, the town engineer and myself and our fields operation director, we take the town and divide it into quadrants. And we look at the roads that need to be done in those respective quadrants. And this year, as I said, a little bit over 11 miles. Now, the public service aspect of this little presentation here is I'd like you to be aware that paving is a two-step process. There's what's called the milling, which is the scraping of the roads, leaving that rough, corrugated type surface. And usually there is a 10 to 12 day lag time. Once a road is milled, then the company goes back and paves it. And during that, let's say 10 days, I want everyone to just please be careful, because the raised surfaces, those manholes, the contractor and our public works paints them orange. When you see the raised surfaces, please proceed slowly, because going over those raised surfaces while that road or after that road has been milled but not yet paved can really significantly impact a tire or a front end. So please be aware that there is a lag time, but all of the roads will be milled and paved this year, and just be careful with the raised surfaces that have the orange circle around them. That signifies a manhole cover that's elevated a little bit higher than the surface itself. Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak to agenda item C? Yes, Third Selectman Sally Buemi.
Good evening, Sally Buemi, 5 Blossom Drive. I joined my fellow members of the Board of Selectmen and voted in favor of recommending this bonding project for milling and paving, as I've done every year that it's come before us. So I support this project, and I urge both of you, all of you, to vote in favor of it. I just have one question. I've noticed in the past couple of weeks, there's been some milling that has already taken place in the area of Bailey Road, Renee, Ball Road, Rourke Road. I'm wondering how that milling work is being funded.
First Selectman Frida.
There's always a lag time, Sally. If the road is starting to be milled, the invoices haven't come in yet, and we have an anticipation that when we start the process, we have to start it because the asphalt plants close somewhere along the line in mid-October. So if this town meeting voted against it, we would take the funding out of municipal grant and aid. That's how it would be. It has not been funded that way yet. It'll be funded after the passage of this, but if this meeting didn't pass it, then we would cease the paving and just take what we've done, and we would fund it out of municipal grant and aid or town aid road, one of the two.
Well, we would have to pave what we already milled,
Yes,
which
right.
is probably about 3 miles, my estimate,
Yep.
from what I've seen in the area.
Yep.
I drive around it a lot. I live in that area. So we would have to, we've already incurred, even though I know they haven't been invoiced, but we've incurred
Right.
costs for milling
Right.
work done and would have to pave it, because you can't keep it like that.
Right.
And so there would be enough in the TARP, is that what you're saying would be used?
There would be enough in municipal grant aid and TARP.
Oh, so MRSA and TARP,
Right.
okay. So it would come from there.
From there.
If this isn't passed. I do understand the time limits before it gets too cold. Perhaps we should, I think it would be tighter and if we, a better process, if we started this a little bit earlier so that we had the town meeting, a special town meeting, maybe June or July, so that it's clear that we've got all the funding. That's how I would recommend going forward in the future. I think it would be a little tighter than starting the project before this legislative body approves the funding. But I do understand there's funding available in case it's rejected. It just seems to be a tighter process. So that would be my recommendation going forward. I don't remember milling starting before the approval, but maybe it had started in areas of town that I don't travel a lot, so I missed it. Just these areas, I live right there, so that's my recommendation, but it doesn't affect my support for this resolution, and I urge you all to vote yes. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on agenda item C? Nancy. Sorry, I don't have my glasses on.
Nancy Barrett, 1 Crestview Drive. I am certainly in support of paving in our town. For those who have watched both the Board of Finance, I'm a member of the Board of Finance, as well as our Board of Selectmen. I certainly have asked Mr. Frieda numerous questions about this particular bonding package because, as he mentioned in the past, it's always been $2 million. And this year, there's a request for $2.6 million. So that represents a 30% increase. I think he's used the estimate of about $200,000 per mile. So going from 10 miles up to 11 miles, it really should be only 2.2 million. But he's also factoring in an increased cost associated with inflation. So I certainly am in support of this, but I have asked quite a few questions about that calculation of that increase up to $2.6 million, particularly when we do have 2 backup funds, if you will. As Mr. Frieda alluded to, we have both MRSA as well as the TARP funds to actually cover any unanticipated costs. And so that's why I wondered whether we should have just kept it at $2.2 million. But nonetheless, I think that this is a worthwhile endeavor for our town, for public safety. And I would like to just reiterate the points made by Mr. Frieda in terms of traveling safely, particularly on Bailey Road, not just in terms of paying attention to those manhole covers and the orange paint that's around them, but also paying attention to the transition from the connector onto Bailey Road and from at the other end of Bailey Road as well. There's a pretty significant lip there, so please be careful, travel at a moderate pace, but nonetheless, I do support this, and I also encourage Mr. Frieda to report back to the public as well as to the Board of Finance as to what the ultimate costs of this paving project will be, whether it is less than 2.6 million, right at 2.6, or it exceeds it, and he has to resort to dipping into other funds. So I am in support of this, and thank you, and have a nice evening.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on agenda item C? All right, seeing no hands, we will vote on the resolution. All in favor of agenda item C, please signify by saying aye. Opposed, signify by saying nay. Hearing none, the motion passes. We'll now end the meeting. As there's no further business to be considered at the annual town meeting, I declare tonight's annual town meeting adjourned. The minutes of the meeting will be made available to the public by the town clerk as soon as possible. You can also view this on NHTV, and you can see it on the North Haven Town Facebook page. Thanks, and have a good night.
The preceding program is brought to you in part through a grant from the Town of North Haven. Watch town meetings or other videos on demand at nhtv.com.